name is Lynn and I'm studying to be a B.C.B.A. Today we're going to look into what to expect from your supervisor or supervision. So the first question a lot of people have is, how do you even get a supervisor? It's required that you have supervision hours to become a B.C.B.A. So how do you get one? There's three main ways to do it. The first way, which is the most common apparently, would be to have a job in the ABA field or to have a job with an ABA agency. This is how I am getting my supervision. The second way is a clinical academic program, so a university-based program that has your supervision hours mixed into your practicum or your academic modules, essentially. They're married together, so you will attend class and then you will attend some sort of workshop or lab or something like that where you get your supervision hours along with your academic practicum. The third way, which is not a very common way as far as I can tell, is you actually go to the B.C.B. website and you look up any available B.C.B.As who are willing to provide supervision hours. Be that as it may, it doesn't seem to be too common, but those who do provide hours do so on a charge by hour basis. So usually they will require or provide 1 hour per week of supervision, and you have to pay anywhere between $75 to up to $150. At least that's the range I found when I was searching. Obviously it's dependent on where you live, if you need one-on-one like in real life, or if you could do it through maybe the computer. It really depends on what you're doing with it. So make sure that if you are looking into supervision with the BCBA, they have completed the 8-hour competency supervision module from the B.C.B. website, and also make sure that they are doing their continuing education hours, which is required of them to maintain their certification. And of course, make sure that they have a BCBA or BCBA-D certification. So when do you start counting your supervision hours? A lot of people assume as soon as you get a supervisor, you can just start counting whatever hours you have. Well, that's not true. Unfortunately, you need to have two things. You need to have a supervisor contract with them, which explains the scope of expectations between both parties and the roles of a supervisor and a supervisee. And at least for FIT, you need to start coursework. So I started my classes on January 11th. I could not start counting any supervision hours, even though I had several supervisor meetings within the first week of January, because I hadn't started my coursework yet. Also, because of that, I didn't have my supervisor sign the contract until the 13th, I believe, which meant that any supervision I had between the 11th and 12th, which I did have supervision, didn't count either because I didn't have that signed contract. So make sure that you have those two things done before you start counting your hours. That's really important. The last thing that a lot of people seem to have a question about is, what do you expect from a supervisor? Beyond going to a meeting, what are you doing at the meetings? Well, BCBAs are required to provide feedback for any and all performances, and they're required to design and document all their feedback. So they can choose to email you all the feedback after your meeting so that you have it in a hard copy somewhere. They can elect to share a Google Doc essentially and show, okay, at this meeting we did this and this is the expectation. So that's how a lot of meetings will go, where you should have an agenda. You should have what you're expected to do, be it practicing or role-playing some sort of module, or discussing basic principles, or bringing up a specific client if you guys share a client together and you want to go more in depth on why we're doing this behavior intervention or what basic principle they're basing a module off of. Another thing that BCBAs are supposed to do is they're supposed to model ethical behavior. This may seem like a minimal duh type of situation, but one of the hardest things in the field of behavior analysis is ethics. Every person I have ever interviewed or talked to about the test or the last exam essentially is the hardest questions generally are about ethics, because in this field, that is what we see the most of as far as difficulties. Because it's really hard when you're trying to, at least in applied behavior analysis, if you are applying it to someone on the spectrum, you need to do so ethically. You need to have a very stable background and have a very supportive team to do so. It needs to be very obvious, and you can even utilize the BACB's 5th edition checklist to see what type of ethics you guys are covering in the checklist. They even break it down. That's like how important it is. It has its own section in the checklist. So it's super important. Another one is they need to create systems solely for the purpose of the outcomes of the supervision activities. So when you guys are actually having a meeting, or if you are attending an assessment and just observing because it's not within your scope yet to actually practice assessments. Supervisors need to document that and say, okay, this is what we're doing, this is what's expected. So that's what you can expect from supervision. As far as I go, I'm receiving my supervision through my ABA agency, and I'm actually currently in the midst of changing my supervisor. This is not preferred, right? Because I already established a contract and a relationship with my current supervisor, but she has received many more cases and her caseload is getting really high, and I'll touch base on that in a bit. And then the other supervisor who I'm about to fall under with a contract, she's actually discharging several cases. So she's now gonna be able to have time to supervise me. So the contract I used for my first supervisor and I'm going to use for my second supervisor is provided from my job. My job already has an entire outline ready to go. You just got to fill in your name, supervisor name, dates, addresses, phone numbers, and you're good. And then you both sign it and then you submit that to HR and they're good. However, the B.C.B.A website does provide a general outline or module that you can use as a sample contract as long as you fill in all the relevant information as well. That being said, I don't really have much of a say in who my supervisor is, obviously, because I'm in the midst of changing. Even though that's the case, I'm going to interview my second supervisor as I did the first. There are 5 really important questions, at least for me, that I found from my textbook, where in the chapter of how do I choose a supervisor, they suggest asking 7 really important questions. I found 2 of the questions to be somewhat redundant, but I'll put all of the questions down either somewhere on the screen or in the description or both. But the 5 main ones that I chose was 1, what is the primary role as a BCBA within this organization? As you can imagine, not every place operates in the same manner. There's going to be different environments that you're working in. There's going to be different expectations put on every step of each role. When I asked my current supervisor that, she actually told me the differences between our current company that we're working with and her previous company. Her previous company had far more expectations on her than this company does. So she actually explained the differences and what she thinks her primary role is here with me and my company. The second question is, how do you assess competencies of your supervisees? Now this is also really important because, as you can imagine, it sets up what is to be expected of you. So you need to understand, are they going to use a Likert scale? Are they going to have questionnaires at the end of every supervision meeting? Are they going to email you like just random questions on the fly kind of deal? So how do they actually assess your competency in understanding the basics and principles of ABA? The third question is, do you foresee any future limitations within our supervision relationship? Obviously, my supervisor did not expect to receive more cases because she said, no, unless I get more cases in my caseload and the company expects me to take those. That is the only limitation I can foresee happening. I'm not going to leave the area. I don't have any plans on leaving the company. And so, of course, this change did occur. That is a limitation. And unfortunately, since it's out of our hands, we can't really do much about it. But it is something that's worth asking, because another supervisor can easily say like, oh, I'm about to have a kid, or, oh, I'm going to be moving. These are all limitations to supervision, right? So it's really important to have those and set that expectation. The fourth question that I like to ask my potential BCBA is what they think their area of expertise is in. Is it in handling parents? Is it in the bureaucracy of working within an agency? Is it being able to juggle different supervisees or having really good relationships with different types of people? So you want to know what they think their area of expertise is in, because you want to be able to work off of that and take advantage of that and really learn from their area of expertise, because there's a very good chance you'll have more than one supervisor. Everyone I know who's received supervision hours never had just one supervisor. It definitely changed throughout their career. So it's easy to just interview each new supervisor and then take advantage of whatever their area of expertise is in, because obviously it's more or less likely to be different than your previous one. So the last one is, what do you wish your supervisor did more of? Every supervisor also said, I had a crappy supervisor. There's not a single person who was like, oh yeah, all my supervisors were perfect. I learned so much. I felt super supported. There's always at least one who was just not really where they should have been. There's even been some horror stories of supervisors being like, yeah, all they did was just assign me articles to read and summarize it. Well, that's not really gonna help practically. Like, their job is to get you ready to be a supervisor within the field of ABA. So it's really important that you ask them that, so it kind of reminds them to be the supervisor they never had. And that's really important. That's something that Kazemi et al. And Sellers et al. In my textbooks have all mentioned, is be the supervisor you never had. And it's really important that they kind of remember that, so that you can bring that up later if they're kind of faltering on something and you're just like, oh, like, I recall that you had mentioned a previous supervisor just didn't really do this that well. How do you plan on improving upon that? That will give them a sense of, oh, okay, like, I can do something better than this because I knew how I felt when I received that type of supervision and it was not good. That's what you should be expecting from supervision. Those 5 questions are, to me, the most important to know. Oh, one thing, that last question is not on the official list of 7 questions that were provided in my textbook. That last question is something I just thought was really important. I don't know why it wasn't in the interview questions, but it is a question that they mentioned you should ask them at some point. So I just included that last one as what I thought was the most important question in my little interview. Realistically, that is what you should expect from your supervisor. That's how you get a supervisor. Hopefully this video helps with understanding where you get supervision, when you can count the hours, and what to expect. In our next video, we're probably going to jump into my more academic side of what I'm studying, because I think I've covered most of what we need as far as starting the BCBA track. I will see you in the next video.